Hey everyone. So to start off with, I want to begin by talking about health in the broadest sense possible from a Chinese medicine perspective. Really, how Chinese medicine, on the most fundamental level, understands what contributes to your health, how your health is formed. And specifically, I want to talk about the idea of the constitution, one's constitution, because this, probably more than any other concept in Chinese medicine, has been misunderstood in the kind of translation of Chinese medicine coming to the West, and I'll explain why that is. So it's a really essential piece to kind of understand. So in Chinese medicine, we understand health in the broadest terms possible to be influenced by two factors, what's called the xiantian or prenatal patterning of an individual and the hotian or postnatal development of an individual. Now, xiantian, meaning kind of pre-heaven or prenatal, refers to the patterning that is ingrained in your jing, your essence, prior to your birth, actually. So it's the kind of set calibrations upon your birth that determine the unfolding of your life. You can think of it like in a sense like your genes. They are set, and indeed your ancestry does influence your xiantian patterning, right? The health of your ancestors, their morphology, the health of your parents when they conceived you, those sorts of things. There are other factors that are classically thought to inform the xiantian patterning as well, which maybe I'll go into a little bit later. But basically what the xiantian patterning is, we could understand it with reference to a plant metaphor. So if you have an oak tree and an oak tree produces an acorn, that acorn contains within it the pure potential for the production of another oak tree, right? It includes, right, it has the genes of the oak tree in it, so to speak. It has that patterning. That's the xiantian patterning. And now you can plant that oak tree in various different places, and depending on where it's planted, it will grow into a very different type of tree, right? Because it'll be supported by a different postnatal environment, hotian, right? No, but the xiantian patterning will be the same. So, for instance, you plant that kind of seed of the oak, that oak acorn, in very shallow soil without a lot of sunlight. The oak tree might it might make it for a little bit, but it might not grow into a very healthy oak tree. It might not thrive. It might not grow very tall. It might not have deep roots. It might not live very long. Whereas if you plant that same acorn in a really deep, lush forest with very nutritious soil and other trees feeding it through its roots and lots of good sunlight, it may grow and thrive and sort of like blossom, right? It may manifest in a very different way. And so you can imagine different environments, different postnatal situations will produce a very different type of tree, but the essence of that tree will be the same, right? No matter where you plant it, it will be an oak tree. And that's because the fact that it's an oak is contained within its essence, right? Contained within its xiantian patterning in that acorn. So it's the same for us humans, right? We have a kind of seed of what we are, and that is set from birth. But then as we go throughout our lives, depending on the experiences we have, the food we eat, you know, our parents, our culture, all sorts of different environmental factors, we may develop into very different types of people, and our health may be very different, right? The initial calibration set in our xiantian patterning may make us tend to lean towards certain imbalances in terms of health, but it's really our postnatal environment which will kind of trigger those things or set us off in those directions. So now in terms of xiantian patterning, all of this really influences our yuan qi. This is what we're talking about, the deepest form of qi in our system, the slowest moving developmental processes of what we are, right? This is yuan qi from a Chinese medicine perspective. And there's two different forms of yuan qi, right? There's prenatal or xiantian huang qi, yuan qi, which relates to that kind of initial calibration set at birth. That's the xiantian patterning of our yuan qi. And then there's the postnatal or hotian yuan qi, which is the way that yuan qi, that deepest, slowest moving developmental process of our being, unfolds throughout our lives. And when we're talking about the constitution in Chinese medicine, we're talking about yuan qi. right? We're talking about both the Xiantian kind of set constitution, and then we're talking about the way that that constitution manifests throughout our postnatal existence in our life. Now, Yuan Qi is one of three kind of, you could say, broad layers of qi in the body. There's Yuan Qi, which is the deepest, most constitutional, fundamental aspect of what we are. Right? This is who we are. There's Ying Qi, which is a form of qi that circulates more quickly than Yuan Qi. It's said to circulate once every lunar month. And so this relates to various kind of processes that the body goes through of maintaining health. It's very much linked with the assimilation of postnatal nutrients like food and air and things like that to help maintain the body. It relates to all sorts of different metabolic processes that unfold kind of in those cycles. It also relates in many ways to our kind of the conscious level of thought and mentality on a day-to-day level. And then we have Wei Qi, which is often translated as guardian qi or protective qi. Ying Qi, by the way, is often translated as nutritive qi, and Yuan Qi as source qi. So Wei Qi being the most superficial, this is the way that our body interacts with the environment on the most immediate level. It's kind of more autonomic. It's processes that happen really, really fast that often we don't even have an awareness of, right? Like I just start sweating. I didn't choose to sweat. I just start sweating in response to the heat of the environment. Or my eyes water, and I'm not sad or anything. The eyes are just watering because I'm smelling onion and it's making my eyes water, or something like that, right? Quick autonomic processes. And Wei Qi is said to circulate 50 times a day. So you can see it's a very fast-moving part of our system, right? Very much related to the immune system in many ways, although other systems as well from a Western perspective. So these three different levels, right? These are three different kind of layers of our being that unfold in different cycles, right? So Yuan Qi would be said to unfold in cycles of 7 and 8 years, long developmental processes, right? Processes of growth and maturity, going through puberty, those sort of going through menopause and andropause. Those are larger cycles of life. Ying Qi, like I said, kind of unfolds along lunar cycles, so lunar monthly cycles, so slightly shorter or much shorter. And then Wei Qi circulates very, very fast. And so these are parts of our being that change at different rates, right? And when we're talking about the constitution, we are talking about the deepest one, right? Yuan Qi, the part of our being that unfolds and changes at a slower level, right? Slower process. It's unusual that a Yuan Qi would change like that, right? The things that would cause that would be trauma. Sometimes like intense trauma can change us on a very, very deep level, which is a very hard thing to work with. From a Chinese medicine perspective, really, really profound traumas, not superficial traumas, deep traumas that kind of shake us to our core. Or potentially, there are certain types of treatments that can affect the Yuan Qi as well. But historically in Chinese medicine, there was even debate about whether one should even do those treatments because they were thought to be almost like playing God a little bit, right? Changing someone's life path, changing who someone is. Because at the level of Yuan Qi, we're talking about who you are, your constitution, right? So we can even map these three different layers, Wei Qi, Ying Qi, and Yuan Qi, onto different kind of parts of our emotional life, right? So Wei Qi phenomena would be a mood, something that we just experience in a kind of fleeting way. We don't have any story about or anything like that, right? It's the sort of thing, I woke up today and I just feel a little off, or I feel a little frustrated. I'm not even sure why. I just feel a little frustrated. And then 2 minutes later, or 5 minutes later, or an hour later, I'm not frustrated anymore. It's just like weather passing through, right? It just comes and goes. Or you walk into a room and there's just a weird vibe, you know? You feel a weird vibe, and you feel a little weird, you know, a little being in that room, and the people there just make you feel That's Wei Qi, right? It's not a deep emotion. It's just a kind of emotional quality, a texture, a mood, what we call a mood. Now, Ying Qi would be slightly deeper than that. Ying Qi would relate to an emotion I'm having. Maybe I'm sad and because this happened to me, and I've been sad for a few weeks about it. Or maybe I'm feeling really excited and happy because this person's coming to visit me or something like that. Their emotions, and generally we have more of a story around our emotions and we identify with them more. There's more of a sense of them being connected to our sense of self. In Chinese medicine, blood relates with the emotions because it relates with the Shen, the part of the mind or spirit, and blood circulates at the level of Yang Qi, the nutritive Qi. So these are our kind of day-to-day emotions. Now, Yuan Qi is the deepest level, like we said, and this wouldn't relate to moods or emotions, but actually disposition. So this is the level at which we're no longer saying that someone is feeling angry. We're saying that this is an angry person, right? Their disposition is toward being angry, or their disposition is toward being sad, right? So you could experience sadness on a Wei level where, oh, I just feel a little sad. I'm not even sure why. Oh, and now it's gone, right? Or a Yin level, oh, I feel sad because, you know, my dog died or something. Oh, I feel sad and I feel it. It's sort of constricting here, you know, it's constricting in my chest, right? That's the metal element, constricting. But then if that keeps going for long enough, it starts to affect the constitution, right? And then we have years of being a sad person, right? I'm just a sad person. All of a sudden, even my skeletal structure has maybe adjusted. I'm sad. And that's part of me. It's ingrained in me, and I may not even be aware of that, right? On the level of Yuan Qi, we're often not aware of ourselves. Other people might be aware of us, but because this is who we are, it's become the lens through which we see the world, and so we don't even know that we're seeing through that lens anymore, right? We don't know that lens is tinted by sadness or tinted by grief or anger or something like that, right? So these are the three levels. And when we talk about the constitution, we're always talking about Yuan Qi. We're talking about Yuan Qi specifically, you know, the kind of postnatal expression of Yuan Qi, but really the Xiantian prenatal patterning that set that Yuan Qi at birth, right? In Chinese medicine, or in Taoism, they say that is implanted in the womb even before a person is born. Now, this is where we get to the confusion around the concept of constitution in modern Chinese medicine. And there has been a ton of confusion about this. And the main reason is because of a man named Worsley, J.R. Worsley, an Englishman who traveled around China and Southeast Asia and learned a lot of different pieces of a lot of different systems and traditions, and then sort of lumped them together and tried to create his own sort of form of Chinese medicine, which then he kind of marketed and sold to, you know, in the West, and taught a lot of people, and there are a lot of schools based around his teachings and stuff like that. The basis of his work is around the constitution, what he calls the CF, or causative factor, the fundamental elemental patterning of an individual, how they would talk about it. Now, the problem is he misunderstood the constitution. He misunderstood this essential part of Chinese medicine, and because of that, those who studied with him and the schools that propagate his teachings and stuff are basically based on misunderstandings of what the constitution is from a Chinese medicine perspective, and I'll explain why that is. So in Worsley's system, a Chinese medicine practitioner, discerns someone's elemental constitution based on 4 parameters: color, sound, odor, and emotion. And based on those 4 parameters, I believe it's just 4, maybe there's a 5th, I think it's just 4. Based on those, one then basically selects or discerns what elemental type someone is. And now there's a long tradition in Chinese medicine of understanding the constitution according to the wuxing, which are 5 phases, or you could translate as 5 elements, even though that's actually a pretty bad translation. Now, what these practitioners do is they will use these different parameters that they can sense from their patient to discern whether this person's an earth person or a fire person or a metal person or wood person or water person, and to treat them based on that, right? And so we could think, this could seem like a really deep form of Chinese medicine. It does to some people because we're talking about the constitution, so it should be really deep, right? It should be getting to the core of what someone is. But unfortunately, these 4 parameters, color, sound, odor, and emotion, are inadequate for understanding or discerning what someone's constitution is, right? Because they don't tell us anything about Yuan Qi. these are all Wei Qi level or Ying Qi level phenomena because they change too quickly, right? Color, the coloring of someone's face, which is what those practitioners are looking at. Of course, the coloring of someone's face is really important information diagnostically, really, really important. But the coloring of someone's face can change. It's generally Wei Qi or Ying Qi, right? The coloring of someone's face, it's not an indication of Yuan Qi much of the time. It could be the Yuan Qi coming forth, but often the coloring on someone's face is very, very much affected by what's happening on a day-to-day level or a month-to-month level, right? These things can change depending on your health. Not your deep constitutional health, but just your month-to-month, day-to-day kind of health. Similarly, the sound of your voice, right? This can change depending on what imbalances are in the system, right? If someone has a major imbalance in the metal element, for instance, they will sound a little bit weepy, right? Which is the sound associated with metal. Or if they have a major imbalance in the wood, they'll sound a little shouty. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're a wood person or that they're a metal person. It just means there's an imbalance in those systems. And those imbalances could be yin level, right? They're not necessarily deep yuan level imbalances. Similarly, odor, right? Odor is often Wei Qi or maybe it's Ying Qi, right? But odor is not necessarily, and definitely not, an expression of the Yuan Qi, right? Our odor changes at different times in our lives. It changes based on what we eat. It changes on how we use our bodies. It changes based on the relative imbalances in our system. But again, those imbalances don't necessarily equate with constitution level imbalances. And emotion, similarly, like we just talked about, right? Emotion is not the same as disposition. So someone could feel really, really sad and express as a very, 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 very sad, even a kind of sad person. But that could be because their parent died 3 months ago and their partner broke up with them and they're confused about their lives and, all sorts of things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they are a grief-stricken, sad metal person, which would be the element associated with sadness and grief. It doesn't mean that's the core of what they are, right? And so this is why 5-element practitioners, unfortunately, just completely got it wrong. They completely get it wrong. It's also why if you go to see multiple different 5-element acupuncturists, often you'll be told that you're multiple different elemental CFs or constitution or causative factors, constitutions, right? Is because they don't have any way of discerning what the Yuan Qi is with those diagnostic tools, right? Neither the postnatal Yuan Qi and certainly not the prenatal Yuan Qi, right? Not the Xiantian patterning. And to me, it's a bit disrespectful to tell someone what kind of person they are on a fundamental level. When actually you don't know, and also to sort of put them in that box, right? When actually you might just be telling them what their dominant pathology is right now, right? You might, often 5-element practitioners will see, oh, this person has a major earth imbalance, right? Their skin is a little yellow colored, they have a sing-songy sort of tone to their voice, maybe they even smell a little bit sweet or something. And maybe they're talking a lot about, feeling disconnected from their home and their family or something, right? All things that might indicate an imbalance in earth. But then they tell them that they're an earth person, that's who they are, right? They teach them to identify with that. And in a sense, that's teaching someone to identify with their imbalance, with their pathology. It's not helping them to overcome it. This is a big problem. Right? And, we shouldn't underestimate how much someone's postnatal development, someone's postnatal environment might actually deviate them from who they are on a Xiantian level, right? On a prenatal level, right? Maybe at your root you are prenatally a wood person, but you grow up in a family and go to school and are in conditions that actually tell you it's not okay to express your wood nature. And that gets out of balance, and so you start expressing like more of a metal person or an earth person, and maybe that wood imbalance, causes issues in your metal system, which it can from a Chinese medicine perspective. And so all of a sudden you have respiratory issues, right, which looks like a metal thing. So there's all sorts of ways that we can miss this. Classically, the constitution would be discerned through mainly two different parameters. One is morphology, right, the slowest changing part of our physical beings, right, our bony structures, right, our facial structure, that sort of thing. That gives you insight into yuan qi, the kind of expression of yuan qi, and then also the configuration of stars and planets, or the timing of birth, basically. So astrology would be classically understood the big way to gain insight into someone's Xiantian patterning. Now, of course, this may not be part of the belief system of some modern acupuncturists, but they should at least take it seriously, because it was taken very, very seriously by the architects of the Chinese medical tradition. So I hope this is helpful. This is a major place of misunderstanding in the modern Western field of Chinese medicine, and it's a shame, because this is such an essential part of Chinese medicine. It's really essential to be able to tell the difference between these different layers of kind of manifestation as a human being, and also to understand what level the imbalance is coming from, so that you can treat it properly. And again, like I said, I think it's disrespectful to tell someone that they are a certain elemental type, especially if that's the kind of person who's really keen on Chinese medicine, interested in it, and is going to do a lot of research and self-introspection around it, because essentially you want to make sure that you're not telling them who they are based on their expression of imbalance, the expression of pathology, right? In some ways, even our prenatal or Xiantian patterning is an expression of imbalance, in the sense that it is a deviation from pure yuan shen, pure spirit, and that is on the deepest level what kind of makes us what we are elementally, from a kind of classical perspective, right? If we deviate more toward wood or fire or earth, those are deviations away from pure balance and pure connection with yuan shen, right, which is prior to the light being refracted into these 5 different colors, these 5 different aspects of consciousness. But at the very least, if we are going to teach someone about their constitution, or help them to discern what their constitution is, we want to help them to discern what the deepest kind of core pattern is, so that they can work with that, as opposed to make them identify with or teach them to identify with a more superficial pattern.